York. I just messed up my slideshow. I am currently home with my family of 2 children, 2 cats, and a 150-pound Saint Bernard. So I have a lot of distractions right now. I've asked them all to be respectful of our time today, but the wheels kind of start falling off the bus around 4 o'clock. So if I all of a sudden go on mute, now you know why. Yeah, I think with that, I'm just going to jump into my next slide, which is more about my background. Are you guys seeing a slideshow, or are you seeing it with the tiles on the left?
Tiles on the left.
Yeah, we're seeing the tiles.
I really want those to go away, and I don't know why they won't. Well, I don't want to pause for that. It's not that important.
Yeah, it's working okay.
Yeah. So I, like I said, I'm from Buffalo. I went and got an undergraduate degree at Tulane University in evolution, ecology, and organismal biology. And then, and I did that on an ROTC scholarship. So from 1999 to 2003, I was a naval officer. When I decided to leave the Navy, it was in large part because I wanted to get involved in sort of the fight against climate change, if you will. And so I went and got a master's degree in environmental protection and management at the University of Edinburgh, which was really fun. I really enjoyed my time as a master's student. And then I had to go to work, right? So I started out in a for-profit recycling company called Parallel Products, where I was an operations manager at a recycling plant. Super interesting, kind of gross, but it was a really good experience. But I decided I really wanted to work sort of more focused on sustainability, like as a thing rather than a specific aspect of it, like recycling. So I ended up getting a job at New York University as a sustainability and energy management project manager, essentially, and program manager. And I did manage the recycling program at the university, but I also managed a bunch of projects around energy efficiency. So that's really where kind of my nuts and bolts, like sustainability work and energy management work started, I would say. I left there to do a short stint with an actual power generation company. And I managed 3 different power plants that burned a mix of coal and natural gas, which was very interesting to learn that side of the business. Ultimately, I felt like I was working for the devil and decided to go back to energy management on the other side of the table. So then I got a job. That's how I came to Utah with the University of Utah as an energy manager. I was there for about 2 years. And then I moved over to the state's Division of Facility and Construction Management. And in my current role, I manage all kinds of building performance programs. I manage a standard for new construction. I manage a team of project managers that do energy efficiency projects primarily. I manage a bunch of standards around how to operate a building efficiently over time. And so here today, I'm actually representing the Utah chapter of the AEE, the Association of Energy Engineers, of which I'm on the board of directors. And this presentation is going to be geared around why does energy efficiency work? Why is it important? Why is it needed? A little bit of that, and then kind of some specific opportunities that you could think about as you look towards getting employed. And the reason I went into such detail on my particular background is very obvious to all of you that I am not an engineer. And I still do this work in having worked in this field now for 15 or so years. I would say engineers are a big part of that story, but it does, we come from sort of a really diverse background, which is kind of nice and leads to some really great problem solving, honestly. So let's, any questions about me before I go into the why energy efficiency is a real deal?
Sarah, I just added clarification that as students here are still getting to know trade associations and so forth, that AEE is analogous to a organization, AKI, that a lot of our chemies, for example, know a lot about, that do a lot of active events on campus. So I just wanted to chime in with that.
Got it. Great. Okay, let's move on. So many of you have probably seen lots of data charts like this, but this is, global energy related CO2 emissions from 1900 to 2020. There was a little bit of a dip right in 2020 when the pandemic hit, which probably has been made up for and then some by this point. Unfortunately, the forecast never really saw that reduction from the pandemic would be sustaining. And this is kind of, like I said, this is one of the reasons I came into this field, is the issue of climate change. This chart shows energy production, productivity versus our GDP from 1970 to 2015. And, as our GDP has gone up, our consumption of energy has gone up. That's not really a surprise. Sorry, I'm on a laptop. I gotta move you guys around so I can see my own slides. So sorry if there's awkward pauses. This is a chart of US energy productivity. And you can see that there has been an increase in energy savings due to energy efficiency. That is a pretty significant slice of this chart. And it's only getting bigger and is continuing to get bigger. Energy efficiency, ever since the IPCC has developed its framework around what we could do about climate change, has always been a big part of one of their wedges. And I'm kind of proof that there is work around this field, and that you can do stuff that would contribute to this kind of reduction.
Sarah, you might clarify IPCC.
Oh, that's the International Panel on Climate Change that kicked off. I think their first big report was in the mid 2000s. It was like this, hundreds of scientists came together to write this report and come up with what they called the wedges of work that could be done in order to reduce or lower the impacts of climate change due to CO2 emission and other greenhouse gases. You might recall at some point in 2007, 8, or 9, they all won the Nobel Prize for that work. That rings any bells? Any questions about that?
One other question: what does GDP stand for?
Oh, gross domestic product. It's often a measure of our the economy, essentially, right?
Okay, thank you.
The wealth. It's sort of like an indicator of the wealth of a country.
On this graph, Sarah, are the energy savings due to structural changes because of energy codes becoming more stringent? Is that what that represents?
Well, code is more pushing towards energy efficiency. That's actually more because of fuel mix changes, right? I'm going to have a chart that comes up that shows how we've kind of flipped from a very coal-dominated energy producing country to a very natural gas dominated energy producing country, and burning natural gas is just inherently more efficient than burning coal, right? And then also bringing in more true renewables. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
You bet. And then this is just that same chart showing carbon emissions and what the impact of reducing carbon has been due to energy efficiency again. Here we have charts of and this is what I was just speaking to, a chart of how we produce energy. And you can see in 2002, over 50% of our energy was due to burning coal, tremendously inefficient fuel source. And now, we're a couple years ago, the vast majority of it comes from natural gas, and you can see a little bit of that increase of the renewables. So coal is down to less than 25%, and you can see wind and solar have grown to over 11%. This, I have to tell you that this data is probably already out. I know it's already outdated, right? Because it's 3 years old, but with the federal bill that's getting discussed right now, like we could see some really exciting things happening around fuel generation source switching in the next coming years. So I'm excited about it if it makes it through.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On that fuel source switching, like those improvements that have been made have mostly been made in large part by increasing our natural gas usage. And is there any thoughts on like, or what are your thoughts, I guess, as far as like in the future on how do we switch from not using natural gas? Because if that's like the cause of what's helping us make these improvements, but eventually we'd like to not, how would we make that transition there?
Yeah, great question. So I mean, the general consensus about how to get to a true carbon neutral society is to move towards electrification at the site, right? Like these are source generated numbers, but at your site, like at the building you're in, if you make that building an all electric building, meaning that you're not burning natural gas in the building to make hot water of any kind, you can then at some point in the future, all of that electricity that you're burning could be sourced by true renewables. And so that's what's going on right now as far as moving away from natural gas is, and the UVU is totally doing this itself. So, you know, start by getting the natural gas out of the buildings, and then that's got to be coupled with kind of a grid level production of renewable electricity, and then you marry those up, and then you don't need natural gas anymore. This has economic impacts on kind of across the map. I know that here in Utah, there's been some bills tried to get ran through the legislation, and I work for the state government, right? So like this is part of my life. Where there would be a reduction in how much new natural gas infrastructure could be built in residential and commercial buildings. That was struck down. The argument on the other side of the table is that lots of people can't afford an all electric house. And so it would be doing a disservice to certain, certain strata of the socioeconomic landscape. And that's why part of the solution to me for this is I really think that our utilities, and this is happening not as fast as I would like and many people would like, but our utilities really need to be pushing the switch to renewables because they can make it part of their business and still profit off of it, and then provide that electricity at a nice rate to the whole, to everybody, right? So that's kind of my stance on that, and also kind of what's happening right now. Do you have any follow-up questions?
No, I like that. I think that's interesting. I think it's just, I understand what you're saying about like with the electrification on like the site level. And then I guess the question I'd have was with these graphs, is that like usage, or it's also saying like at the power plant where they're generating the electricity, this is how they're doing it?
Yeah, this chart is about source energy. It's about how electricity is being, or energy is being created. Like, what is the source of it?
Okay.
Yep.
AKA the supply side, Brooke, not the demand.
Okay.
Thank you, Julie.
Actually, I had one other question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. This is what I wanted to happen. So I don't like listening to myself speak.
Yeah, I had a question about the nuclear one. Is there a reason why that has been basically stagnant and that hasn't been an option that's been pursued?
Yes, I know the answer to this because I did work for that power generating company that actually does have a huge nuclear plant in southern New Jersey, and the answer is mostly political. There is a lot of anti-nuclear you know, movement kind of ever since those big meltdowns that happened, like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island. There's a big push through the political process that nuclear wasn't safe. And so it totally went stagnant. That's mostly the reason. There's also some economic reason, just because it's really expensive to build a nuclear power plant. It's
Right.
much more expensive than like building, you know, a gas turbine fired generating plant or something like that. And so as companies like the ones I used to work for are looking at, you know, building out new assets, they're constantly weighing the cost versus the revenue. So there's that aspect to it, but it was mostly a political reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
You bet.
If you don't mind, I have a follow-up question with that real quick.
Yeah.
I'm just noticing that the nuclear, percentage went down, but I'd assume that the total amount of electricity consumption has gone up by a lot in the past 20 years. So has the amount of nuclear generation still gone up, but just the ratio, the percentage has gone slightly down? Is that what we're seeing here?
Yeah, that's a pretty good assumption. Like you saw here, you know, you can see it. Like we pulled all these charts from the I gotta move you again, from a source, like a different source. Like we did not generate this data. So the ACEE, which is based on EIA data. So that's all like programs that are run and managed by the Department of Energy. So I would say that's a good assumption, but since I didn't create this data, I can't say definitely that overall the amount of nuclear has gone up, but the percentage has gone down, but safe assumption, I would say.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I have another question. I'm so sorry. This is a very interesting topic. I think, especially with this one, with like how to source our electricity. And at least to me, it seems like it's kind of like the crux of the problem.
Mhm.
And so when you on the nuclear, like it's very, like at least from like what I've been able to learn from it, is that it doesn't emit almost any carbon emissions. Is there any attempt on like a political scale to change public opinion or to move toward that as a way to potentially reduce like natural gas or coal?
Yes, you are correct. Nuclear power, by most people, is considered a clean energy source. It definitely is from a greenhouse gas perspective. It doesn't produce any byproduct except water vapor. I have read some things that said there are certain entities looking a little harder at nuclear power for that very reason. I don't remember those articles or whatever that I read, but there's a pretty, like, some of the more aggressive greenhouse gas reduction targets, especially that are being pushed by this presidential administration. Probably we couldn't meet it without using a little bit more nuclear power. So I guess you could say that, yeah, there's some political will to take another look at it. Obviously, there's the nuclear waste side of nuclear power that has to be dealt with. And so, that would have to be, it's just really hard to sell. There's like a NIMBY thing. Have you guys ever heard that?
Yeah, not in my backyard.
Yeah, that's a big deal. It would be potentially difficult to find a place to build more plants, but it's obviously doable. I mean, there's NIMBY issues about basically everything about power generation. So it's just a matter of which battle the people who have the money to do it and the political will want to fight, right?
Okay.
So
Sarah, I was
Yeah.
also going to just join in or chime in with a local anecdote that it's UAMPS, the Utah Association of Municipal Power, I think, supply, or it's basically the muni utilities in Utah that, in their plan for carbon neutrality, for example, Brooke, they are highly leveraging nuclear resources to achieve that.
awesome. And so now we're that was kind of the why is energy efficiency like a real, a real option for, starting or focusing a career on. And now we're kind of going into what's actually out there in the workscape. There's this huge push right now in the private sector around what used to be more commonly known as corporate social responsibility, but it's kind of changed its acronym to ESG, which stands for environmental social governance. And it's a real thing. And it really, it seems to me that it sort of started filling the gap more and got more aggressive for a couple of reasons. One is companies started to make the link between being environmentally, like truly environmentally conscious and having a sustainable investment base, which is obviously important in the private sector. And then big analytical think tank generators like Bloomberg started to show them that that was real, that the sort of the assumption that if my investors are telling me that I want to invest in a company that is environmentally and socially conscious, that company is actually going to get a higher rate of return. So there's a lot of information, a lot of data out there that proves that out these days. So companies have started to get really serious about it. This is one example of Walmart and their emission reductions, but you could read this story now about any of the top 5, probably any of the top 500 Fortune companies, Fortune 500, and probably a good share of the Fortune 1000 companies. So there's definitely this industry is definitely established and it's growing right now, and it's going to keep growing. And some of this is my opinion. Even if this bill that the Biden administration is trying to put through doesn't pass, just because climate change is becoming so in your face, right? Like all of a sudden, like people are having to live with it, like sadly. So this is, a big company example. And then you can see too, just locally, Salt Lake City School District has a resolution around carbon neutrality. Salt Lake City does, Park City does. Unfortunately, the state doesn't, but this is kind of like those companies filling in some of the gap that was felt from a federal level during the Trump administration. It's just building on itself. And any private company or any municipality or government that wants to get serious about this, they need smart people to come in and tell them, first how much energy they're consuming, because if you don't know that, you can't do anything about it, and then how to reduce, right? So thanks. Any questions about that? So this chart shows you how we use energy. So now we were talking about source energy. This is site energy. You can see lighting is a big deal. Refrigeration, ventilation, that means, heating and ventilation. You guys are engineers, I'm sorry, you know what ventilation is. Cooling, computers, office equipment, and then you start kind of getting into really small things, cooking, space heating. And so space heating, big space heating is obviously part of cooling and ventilation. So that must be more like running kind of independent heaters kind of a thing, heating water, and then anything that falls outside of this. So this really, this is commercial buildings, right? Perfect. So, that's why engineering firms and commissioning firms are playing a really big role in how we achieve energy efficiency or energy reductions in commercial buildings, because you see where the usage is coming from. And I can tell you that me and my project managers, we absolutely are managing, lighting upgrades to LEDs. We're putting in more efficient HVAC equipment. Like that's what we do, and it has a big impact. And you can measure it, and you can tell your success story, and it just rolls right into getting more work and more funding.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you seen a change? So this is from 2012, but have you seen a change in the proportions of each category in last years?
I'm sure they've changed. I would, without being able to like research it right this second, I would guess that the lighting percentage has gone down, because since 2012, just a ton of LEDs have been retrofitted into buildings, right? And they are so much more efficient than their predecessors that it does have a big impact. I just had one of my project managers did a lighting upgrade in one of our more sizable office buildings, and I think it ended up showing like a 17. Well, I might be thinking that because it says 17 right there, but it was a double digits. It wasn't over 20%, but a double digits reduction in the overall energy use or electricity use in the building. So that's a good.
Also, there might be some development in the space heating area for electricity, with heat pumps being used more than before.
Yeah. Heat pumps in commercial buildings is still kind of a novel concept. But they are definitely getting, they're starting to get put into the mix of a heating and cooling solution for sure. I think that heat pumps have spread out in the residential sector much faster. I'm not really sure why, because I think commercial size heat pumps have been available just as long as the smaller residential units. I think it was just an education, an education thing. But that's a great point. Any other questions or comments about how we use energy? Buildings, cool. So this is a projection of that one of my colleagues, I believe at AE did. It was just like, what could it look like, if we want to hit this target reduction overall from a 2012 baseline. And you can see that energy efficiency is pretty much tied with renewables. Like, I can't stress enough how much opportunity there is. And that's really what this slide is about. I think the idea and an understanding of renewable energy is sometimes a little bit easier for people to kind of just grasp and latch onto. And it's certainly going to be part of the solution, but energy efficiency in buildings is also just got to be part of the solution. And there is no end of work around it is kind of the point here. So this is kind of what we're trying to share with you today. For learning objectives, we want to make sure you can correlate energy efficiency measures with high energy productivity over time. Identify areas of high demand in energy efficiency employment. And I have some slides that are going to speak to that. We want to summarize the requirements and steps for obtaining a certified energy management certification, which is something that the Association of Energy Engineers, and again, that's who I'm representing today. It's one of the things they do. It's if you're interested in being an energy manager or working in energy efficiency, it's a very well recognized kind of certification. And yeah, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about our membership for students and what you might get out of that. I'll move you guys around again. Okay. Perfect. Oop, went too far, hang on. Ugh. All right. So again, employment prospects in the sector are really good. Again, these numbers and percentages are from 2019, and even despite the pandemic, I can guarantee you that these percentages have gone up in the last 3 years. It's just, there's a demand for it. And it's mostly in construction and professional services. I have a little bit more detailed information about that in the next slide. If I can. So I'm going to pause and kind of walk through this. And this is this information is from a survey that the AEE did. It's the AEE. I'm part of the Utah chapter, but it's a national association. And so they surveyed their members, and they asked them about this question. Do you think you're going to employ an energy professional in the next 12 months? And so you can see here where the sectors are that are the higher, like higher percentages of yes. So the consultant world around this is huge, right? And that includes, this engineering design firms that's a consultant. Commissioning firms are consultants. That environmental social governance work, like if a private corporation wants to build a plan around that and then do all the reporting that they can do to sort of get recognized for that, lots of them hire consultants for that work. Just no end of that kind of work. And then you can see there's some hiring going on in all the sectors that are introduced here. One of the ones that is kind of a higher percentage too is ESCO work. That's performance contracting work. That's firms, companies that one of the barriers to doing energy efficiency work is you have to pay money, right? You have to like perform a project and you have to have funding for the project in order to achieve the savings. For the most part, you can achieve some energy efficiency results through more like behavioral programs, but even that, somebody's got to like manage it, right? Whether it's you're paying a salaried person or bringing in a consultant to do it. And so ESCO companies bring the funding with them and they pay themselves back from the savings they achieve. A lot of my fellow board members on the AEE here in Utah have done work for ESCO companies in the past. One of them still does. So that's a really interesting sector. Any questions about this? Have you had enough time to consume this very busy chart? Okay, let's move right along.
Take silence as a yes, Sarah.
Yeah. So where is it, again, digging into where is energy efficiency deployment available by industry? Professional businesses, again, and businesses consulting, manufacturing. You can see there's a lot of work in construction, right? I would say that I work in construction. So this aligns completely with me, with what I experience kind of every day. So this was based off a survey, but I can say that it pretty much represents the landscape. Any questions on this? So this is about hiring difficulty. And so this is from the employer side, right? This was information that was compiled by the National Association of State Energy Officials and Energy Futures, because they needed to know where the roadblocks were as far as actually hiring people to do this kind of work. And you can see that all of them report a relatively decent percentage of very difficult to find qualified people to hire, which means there's a lot of opportunity, right, for somebody looking for work. Continuing on with that survey information, where was the highest demand for occupation by what it is, what kind of job you're looking for. And you can see here that there's a big need for engineers and scientists, which is great. By education, I'm a scientist, but I will just tell you that I have mostly lived my professional life in the management. I would have also maybe circled these management sectors, right? Because as I've been describing, in order to do this work, you need the engineering. You have to figure out that technical solution, but you need people, a lot of people, to actually manage the work or manage other people managing the work, which is kind of where I'm at the moment. But any questions about this? Pretty crystal clear. Okay, we're in the end game here. What is a certified energy manager certificate? I kind of described it. You can see the eligibility requirements. It's just pretty tiny. There are eligibility requirements is probably the most thing, but if you have an engineering degree, you only need 3 years of experience to get the certification. There is like a process, right? And I'm going to go through that. And then if you have different types of degrees, you need a little bit more experience until, if you don't have any kind of degree, then you need 10 years of experience in the field in order to sit this exam and get the certification. So kind of just giving you some idea that it's like a real thing. It's not like a plug through it on a webinar and you get like a thing in the mail. Like, it takes some time and work. And our recommendation is the AE offers preparatory training seminars that are, I believe they're a week long. I ended up 15 years ago, there's another certificate they give called the Certified Energy Auditor, which I did. And that was a week-long training and an exam. And then you can see if you pass the exam and you don't meet the minimum qualifications, then you can get to that within 6 years, and then you get it, and you get this other EMIT thing in the interim. I can also tell you, because I went through a process with this, is that I don't want the qualifications to be intimidating. Like, you can often get, you can sort of get vouched for by somebody that you're already working with, and so they do exist. The qualifications do exist, pre-qualifications, but they're not like set in stone, I guess is my message there. And this is our last slide. So one of the big important things is, I'm sure you all know about finding employment, especially in something that you really want to do and are passionate about, is creating a network for yourselves with, a group of professionals. You're already doing that kind of with this program that you're in today. But our AE chapter, we do a webinar every month on some topic related to energy efficiency, and they've actually been really, really great. Especially through the pandemic, we got to pull off some really great webinars. But our student membership is free. You literally just have to go to our website and fill out a little tiny application form, and you'll start getting invited to those. You'll get information, you'll get connected with a bunch of people like myself who work locally in this industry. We have a lot of engineers, we have a lot of commissioning agents, we have some trades folks, and who else? I know I'm forgetting somebody. Building operator, facility managers, kind of the whole gambit of commercial life. We have some folks from industrial industry. We have representation from both Dominion and Rocky Mountain Power. So it's a pretty good network of folks. I like them. They're fun. And then if you want to join the national AEE, that's only $15 for students. And they send out all kinds of really cool journals and stuff that are really well researched, kind of right now, like what's new in building science kind of situations. I forgot to say this at the beginning, but I have actually been an IAC customer. About 3 or 4 years ago, you guys did an audit of a technical college for me. So I meant to tell you that I know what you do, what you're getting paid to do. And it was really helpful. It actually allowed me to get funding for a full retro commissioning project at that building. So, okay, I am done. What questions can I answer?
Well, Sarah, I'll start off. Maybe I'll get the ball rolling a little bit. I had one question from a student asking about the CEM certification. There is a IAC certificate that these students can get after they complete a certain amount of work with the program, and they were asking if that was the same thing. So you might just clarify the professional certification a little bit more.
Yeah. So I know this slide is probably hard to read. So you do have to take the exam, the CEM exam that the AEE administers to get a CEM certification. You don't necessarily have to do the training seminar. You could skip that, but everybody that I know who's sat the exam said that the training seminar was a really good idea. So That's the only way to get it is to sit the exam and then to have the relative experience that you see on the right side of this chart. But your interaction with the IAC would count to that experience.
So just to clarify, your IAC experience does count, but this is a different certification. This is a professional industry certification, as opposed to what you'll get working with the program here, which is the IAC certificate. So good question. Just wanted to put that out for everybody so I could clarify it across the board. So Sarah, a couple questions. Andrew, yes, go for it. I got a couple more, but you go first.
Yeah, so quick question. So what you're saying is, since I've been in the IAC for 3 years, when I graduate, I can sit the exam and get the certification already?
Yep.
Wow, okay, cool, good to know.
I would think so. I mean, I said that very definitely, but you do have to submit your background to, you know, like the national AEE, whatever, they probably employ people to review those applications. But I would be surprised if they didn't count it as 3 years of experience. Yeah. And that's just that's based on, like I said, having made an application myself a long time ago, but just knowing, like, one of my project managers got this certification last year or the year before, and kind of knowing, you know, that they're not super hard-nosed about it, I guess is the best way that I could put it. You know, like if you said you did this for 3 years, they're not going to come back and be like, well, show us your pay stubs for, you know, 36 months worth of work at the IAC. You know what I mean?
And Sarah is going to add that, actually, for your context, Andrew, and everybody else, there is a relationship at the national level between AEE and the IAC. So the programs know each other. So I think that is definitely a feather in your cap.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Sarah, is there any plans at this point for the Utah chapter to host a CEM training and testing?
We don't have one of those in the works right now. We have done them in the past. Part of we have to show national AE that there's enough interest in order for them to want to pick Salt Lake City as a destination for that. And you usually need to draw in folks from, you know, kind of like a region, right? Like we would be looking at least Idaho, Nevada to bring other people in so that they would want to send their trainer here. But Julie, if you think there's a lot of interest, we can definitely do that again. It's actually one of the things we really like to do is to bring the training here and make it available to our local industry. Because like I said, I work with a bunch of people who want to hire people with this certification. So
Andrew and others, just point of clarification, at least the last that I knew, these testing and the exam and the study are required in person. I don't know that there's a virtual option. So that's what we're talking about. Sometimes there have been the studies actually, or this event has been hosted in Utah, but a lot of times professionals will have to travel to a location to be able to do this training and testing. So Sarah, one other follow-up question. Well, a couple things actually. If students are interested in getting on the email distribution list for AEE, the chapter here in Utah, you might just put your email address in the chat. And they can make a note of that, send you email and get on the list. The other thing I was going to say is many of the professionals that are the professional circles that you highlighted in slide 14 and others are presenting to our class. So for example, Sunny's coming next week to talk about cooling towers for a couple weeks.
yeah.
Sunny in particular in the past has told me about scholarships available through AEE. Is that again the case this year? And is that something you could give this group a heads up on?
Yeah, so we can nominate students to National AEE for a scholarship. Gosh, Julie, I meant to read up on this before before this presentation. I even remember, this is why mental notes don't work, right?
No worries.
So I just put my email in the chat too. I did it, typed it, fat fingered it the first time, but the second one is right. Anybody's welcome to reach out to me and I can give you more information about that scholarship. We don't have a locally, like the local chapter doesn't have a scholarship, but we have in the last few years, we've been hiring interns. So we've been sort of providing that paid internships. I've hired somebody in the last couple of years, and so is Sunny's company, but some of the other firms are usually interested in that. So it's not a scholarship, but it's an opportunity.
Yep.
Internships are always, when you're a full-time student, I think they're always a good idea. Again, that's my opinion. Yeah.
Internships are very much on this group's mind right now. So basically, if you guys are interested in getting involved with the information for the Utah AWE chapter, if you want to know about the AWE scholarship, and or if you want to talk to Sarah about internships, do make a point to write down her email that she put in the chat. It's just, is it just sboll@utah.gov?
Yep, sboll@utah.gov, nice and short.
Okay, well, fantastic. We have actually kept these guys here about 10 minutes extra. So unless there's any other burning